Welcome to Bible Divas, where women biblical scholars bring the academy to your earbuds.
And guess what, friends? Today you are in for a treat because you have all of us today. And we're going to be talking about some of our experiences as women biblical scholars in the academy. So hold on to your hats.
Welcome to Bible Divas, a podcast from Baptist News Global where four women Bible scholars bring curiosity, expertise, and a healthy dose of sass to conversations about Scripture. Whether you're certain, skeptical, deconstructing, reconstructing, or just curious, pull up a chair. The Bible Divas challenge assumptions, explore new perspectives, share a few laughs, and discover why this ancient book still matters today.
So we have quite a few episodes now under our belt. We've gotten to talk to some amazing women scholars. And every single one of them, we have asked, what is your experience as a woman in academia? And some of their answers really stuck with me. And I wanted to talk about that a little bit before we talk about our own experiences as women. So I was thinking specifically about my interview with Dr. Alicia Myers at Baylor University. Cynthia and I interviewed her, and she was talking about how, and I've seen this in scholarship, about how male scholars sort of automatically don't cite or quote the women in their field. And it's especially obvious, I say, in Johannine scholarship, because it's been dominated by men. And then maybe in the last 15 years, some amazing women scholars have come onto the scene. And yet the men continue to ignore their scholarship, to not cite it, to not quote it. And Alicia is legitimately top 10 John scholars in the world. Like, she's part of a special John society, right? And she's the youngest man, and yet these men are still not citing her. And so that is a frustrating thing. Yeah, that I think all of us have had to deal with as women. So that really stuck out to me when it came to Dr. Myers' interview.
Yeah, I was really struck by that too.
Go ahead, Cynthia.
Oh, right. So and the thing that she mentioned in that interview was she was talking about, at least if I remember correctly, that she cited specific people that had happened to, but it's also happened to her. And in fact, somewhat recently, someone was talking about how they wanted to study women in the Gospels, mothers in the Gospels, and they didn't mention her work, which she has a particular chapter on the topic this person was interested in. And at this point, this person had done a lot of research, but they had not read that chapter that had, almost so much that this person could use. And how, she is one of the top 10 scholars in her field, at least top 10, and how we have to stick up for ourselves in ways that male scholars probably don't.
Yeah. And as I was listening to you all interview Dr. Alicia Myers, wonderful scholar, it made me think about the same thing in Pauline literature, in Pauline scholarship. Right. Because Pauline's scholarship is very similar. I was looking at the new Erdman's catalog of Pauline books that are coming out. And so 3 books on Paul are coming out by Michael Gorman, Douglas Campbell, and I want to say Michael Bird. And so all of these quote unquote big name Paul scholars are writing books. And I have a book coming out in Paul next year as well. And as I was writing my Paul book, I was going through all of these male Pauline scholars that, of course, I had to quote, but it will be interesting to see over the years whether the womanist work that I do in Paul will be quoted. Because when we think about the work that we do, oftentimes what I hear in the academy is that there's hard scholarship versus what we may do as womanists or feminists. They will call us niche. And they'll say niche as a way to say that we are not important scholars or that we are not doing hard scholarship. So it'll be interesting to see over the years if Pauline scholars will pay attention to the work that I do as a Pauline scholar.
Well, and along those same lines, Angela, when we were talking with Susan Ackerman, who tends to deal with women, she was talking about her work, and I was like, "Do you ever get pushback for dealing with women so much?" And she was like, "Well, yeah, sometimes, but I do really good work." And I don't think that people who focus on women should have to say, "But I do really good work," right?
Right.
Like, of course she does good work. And she works on women. That's not niche. That's half the population. So, yeah.
Yeah, that you have, if you do, not just as women scholars, but if you are a woman scholar who happens to study women in whatever text or corpus of text or context we're talking about, that there is this sort of justification of, oh, well, she studies women. And that's not hard scholarship, like you were saying, that's niche scholarship.
Whereas if she had been like, "Well, I'm a David person," she wouldn't have to justify that and be like, "But I do good work."
Yeah,
It's just it's annoying.
it's annoying.
That's one word for it.
You guys have any other experiences or things that you heard that stuck out to you with our interviews?
I was thinking about Dr. Candida Moss and how she was talking about death threats and people bringing up her sex life and as she was doing her scholarship, and how as she was doing more public scholarship, those things that were coming to her as a woman scholar, and how we navigate being women scholars, particularly for the four of us as we become more public facing as well. So how we manage that as we do our particular podcast and what that means for us, because we are becoming more public facing as well. So I'm interested in hearing how you all think about navigating that.
Yeah, it's a good question.
I mean,
I'll
I
be
love that
honest.
she,
Oh,
I'm
you go.
sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Okay, I'll say I'll be honest, and I was discouraged myself when she said, "Do not get into public facing ministry if you're sensitive or have thin skin," because I'm like, yeah, that's
Mm,
me.
mm.
I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I should listen to her, or maybe I should grow some thick skin.
Well, I
Go
remember
ahead.
her mentioning like how people comment on her appearance and things like that. And I have had these thoughts as a woman scholar. Number one, should I have blonde hair? Will people take me seriously if I have blonde hair? Also, one time when I was preaching at a local church, I cannot tell you how much time I thought about whether or not you could see my panty line. Like, that's insane. Men don't have to think about that. But I was like, oh gosh, can you see it? Should I wear a slip? Like, what should I do? It's just a lot to carry.
Well, it's funny, I do a series on my own TikTok called Scripture Through Womanist Eyes. And so as I'm talking about text, I'll do my eye makeup. And so
Mm.
I had someone call me a demon on my own TikTok because they accuse me of encouraging girls and women to falsify themselves by putting on makeup and talking about scripture, because that's essentially like the devil's work. If you're a woman and you wear makeup, you're mischaracterizing yourself to the world and to men. So I was just like, wow. And they went to some obscure apocryphal text to call me a specific demon. And I was just like, wow, dude, you went really deep for that one. But I was just like, okay, cool. You know what? I reached somebody in Idaho and he had to go and call me a demon. So the what? You know?
Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Well, when Dr. Moss's statement, it got me thinking about some of the conversations I've had with Another scholar that I hope we can have on here soon, Francesca Strakopopoulou, and I apologize if I mispronounce her name, but she's a British scholar and she's done a lot of public facing scholarship in the UK. And she's had, like Dr. Moss, has a lot of, comments about her physical appearance, about her sexuality, and how her attractiveness means she is only taken seriously because of how she looks and not because of how good of a scholar she is.
Yeah.
Yep. Not uncommon.
Not uncommon at all.
Oh.
So then what are interested to hear about some of your own experiences, whether that be in the classroom, in ministry context, in the academy. I know from previous conversations we've all had our own experiences, and unfortunately, as women scholars, I think that is the norm. It doesn't mean it's right, but I think you talk to any female biblical scholar and they will have something to share.
Yeah. I mean, since we were just talking about women, women's attractiveness or people paying attention to the way women look, um, I got to tell a story about when I was a PhD student. And I was the only female in the program, in the New Testament program. And so almost all my classes, I was the only woman. And one day, I think we had presentations or something in seminar, and the professor, who is an older gentleman, very famous scholar, fine guy, but he says, "Okay, now it's time for the most attractive student in our class to give her presentation." Um, so there's a lot to say about this because like I have to tell you about my reaction and response and like why I responded the way I did because I didn't say anything in that moment. Right? You're in the middle of a class, he is the authority figure. But also there's more behind it. Like I had learned through church and being in seminary with my MDiv and being raised Southern Baptist and being raised in an army town that that the way I looked did matter. Like I'd internalized that. And so it didn't register as horribly as it should have in the moment. Right. And so I didn't say anything then. And I regret that a lot because it just taught the men in the room that what was important about me was not my work and my scholarship. And it was an awesome paper that I presented. But it had, what was important was the way I looked. I eventually did say something to like the student council sort of that we had. And I think they took it to administration. And I think they talked to the professor just to say, hey, maybe that's not appropriate. That's kind of all that happened, right? And that kind of taught me that that administration are going to protect the male older established scholars from things. They probably just said, it's not a big deal. He didn't mean anything bad by it, whatever. But that taught me that this is the way it works in our field, right? Like they're gonna protect the people who have held the power, the people who have power protect people who have power, right? And even when people say horrible things that undermine my scholarship, but also my thoughts about myself, right? That's not important, right? We need to protect those people. So that was a early experience I had that kind of set the tone for what was going to happen in academia. So
Jen, if you could go back to that moment and change that, what would you have liked to have said or reacted?
That's a good question. I think I would have hopefully been brave enough to say, what is important here is not the way I look, but what work I'm about to present to the class. I think I would have said that. But, I don't think anybody in the class even felt weird about it. They never said anything to me about it. So, yeah, it was It was something else.
It's giving like, when pastors would be like, my smoking hot wife is sitting in the front row. That's like kind of what it's giving.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Do they really do that? Oh God.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll go to another story. It wasn't I did never got like the attractiveness piece. I don't think we get that as Black women. We get the
Mm.
presumed incompetent piece mostly. And I remember being in a Greek class where, I was the only woman and the only Black person. And so the professor says, okay, I'm going to assess your level of knowledge of Greek by having you sight read. And I'm just going to call you pursuant to the roll. It was the first day of class. So he goes by the roll and just by his taking attendance, he's taking attendance and asking each person to read one line of scripture. It was First Corinthians, and then translate it by sight reading. So he gets to my name, and I'm again the only woman. So it's me, and I'm the only Black person in the room, as you can visibly see. So it's me and 20 white guys. I read one verse. He says, okay, can you do another one for me? So I read and translate another verse. Can you just do one more for me? So I read and translate a third verse.
And no one else
I'm
had
the
to.
person in the classroom who he asked to read and translate 3 verses.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Did not do that to anyone else in the room. Those moments actually make me better than anyone else in the room because
Mm.
you presume I'm incompetent or that somehow I slipped through or that somehow I'm affirmative action or DEI. But because you test me even more, I'm better than anyone else because you overtest me. Don't let people assume just because you're African American or Asian American or any other ethnicity that you slip through the cracks somehow. No, we get tested more
Mm-hmm.
because I think we are women or we are different ethnicities.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
100% true. Like I have seen I've seen that in classrooms and I've seen, well, even Angela, I'll admit this to you, even sometimes my own assumptions about students, I have to stop myself and be like, hey, that student that is in my class, just because they're Black doesn't mean they're an athlete. Just because they're Black doesn't mean that they won't be able to do this Hebrew translation, And so kind of like being willing to confront those own stereotypes that we all kind of have is so important. And it happens to woke white ladies too, you know? So yeah, that's
Another story.
wild.
I had one professor tell me, your people don't do languages.
What?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
overt.
Your people.
What?
It was funny because he kind of whispered it. He was like, your people don't do languages. And so I leaned in and I said, which people? And he was like, more. I was like, Black people. You all can barely speak English. And I'm
Oh
like,
Gosh.
you gotta be kidding me.
Meanwhile, I have never seen anybody as nerdy as the Reverend Dr. Angela Parker standing with her Greek New Testament and just translating on the fly to a room full of people. I'm like, this lady's got nerd vibes for days.
Tested me, so I have to show off my Greek
You
anytime
do.
anywhere.
That's true. That's true.
What about you, Anna? Have you had any experiences?
So I had an interesting experience. I was at an institution that decided to invite Russell Moore, who he's a fairly common, like known name. He was big in the Southern Baptist Convention, and then he was critical of Trump in 2016. And so the Southern Baptists got mad at him, and he left and started working at Christianity Today, which is the epitome of failing up for white men. Um, Anyway, so he got invited to the institution I was at, and this man, this man has made his career in the Southern Baptist Convention, where he's published things where he said, like, patriarchy is intrinsic to the gospel. If you don't have patriarchy, you don't have the gospel. Like, he was so high up in there, and then he was critical of Trump and became friends with Beth Moore, which, I'm sorry, but that bar is pretty darn low. Anyway, so he got invited to the institution that I was at the time, and it was an institution that is dedicated to ordaining women for ministry. And I want to say this really quickly. Because we are women, we are limited in the institutions that we can even work at, right? Like, we do Bible in higher ed, but we can't do Bible everywhere because not every institution thinks it's okay for women to do Bible.
Right.
And so just want to name that really quickly. Anyway, I was frustrated, and I was like, why are we bringing this man here? And I went to talk with one of my male colleagues about this invitation. And I said, this is terrible. And he said, Anna, it's not personal. It's academic. And I said, with all due respect, sir, it's not personal for you. It is very personal for me, because what he stands for flies in the face of who I am as a woman and a scholar. And I think that that is an important realization for men to come to. Lots of times they think, oh, this is just a topic. But it's not for us. It's who we are. And so that was a frustrating experience.
I think Black feminism and womanist thought speaks to a lot of things. I'm thinking about Combahee River Collective? Am I saying that right?
I don't know.
One of the foundational thoughts from the 1950s, 1960s, when Black feminists were coming together, was the idea that the personal is political and the political is personal.
Mm.
So when these things happen and people say, oh, it's not personal, or it's only politics, or it's only academic. No, these things actually affect human lives. These decisions affect actual people. And when someone says it's not personal, again, it's not personal to you, but it is personal to someone. It's just not hitting you directly. And I think we are living in an age now, especially in the age of Trump, where people are now realizing that what they thought was going to affect someone else is now affecting them.
Ooh.
And now they're, oh my goodness, it's affecting me. I'm losing my SNAP benefits. But I thought it was just going to be those people losing their SNAP benefits. If we actually were trying to walk the walk of Jesus, we would be taking care of everyone, and we would be concerned about the personal for everyone else, and not just worrying about, oh, it's just academic. And I think that's the difference also between folks who want to say, oh, we have to do hard scholarship and not niche scholarship. That if you're just trying to do hard objective scholarship, you can let the world go on fire and not worry about anything.
Well, and you're a liar, because there's no objective scholarship.
Exactly. That part too. You're a liar because you're saying you're doing objective scholarship and you're really not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
No, it's good. It's good stuff.
I like that soapbox. Make it taller. The experience I wanted to share with y'all, it really comes from when I got my first tenure track job. So I had been teaching as an adjunct ever since I finished my MA. So I had, before I even got my first position, even before I started my PhD, I had tons of teaching experience. And so I got my first tenure track job, and I went to our annual meeting for SBL the following fall, and I participated in a Wabash teaching workshop on using technology in the classroom. And so, you're sitting at these round tables and you're getting to know different professors from all over the place or different scholars from all over the place. And during one of the breaks, I was talking with a man, you know, quite a bit older than me at the time. And he said, "Oh, this classic conversation, where are you at?" And I said, "Well, I'm at a small school you've probably never even heard of." And he said, "Oh, really? What school is that?" And I said the name of the school. And he said, "Oh, I applied for a job there." I said, "Oh, you did? What job?" "Oh, their recent Old Testament job." I go, "Hmm." Yeah, and I wasn't going to say anything. And he said, "What do you teach there?" I said, "Old Testament." And he said, "Oh, I heard they were going to get a woman for the job." And I was very proud of myself because Jen, normally I would react similar to how you stated you reacted in your classroom, where you're just a little too shocked, too stunned
Mhm.
to come up with words at all, let alone the right words. And but I did this time, so I was very proud of myself because that never happens. And I said to him, "Well, I said I like to think that I was the right person for the job, and that's why they hired me." And thank goodness our break was over. We went back to our tables, and I was a bit distracted the rest of the time, and angry and fuming and just thinking, "How dare he?" type of things. But to his credit, at the next break, he did come up and apologize.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, so it does have a little bit of a happy ending there. So as far as getting the job and not just, I thought, no, I earned this job. I was, the top person out of all these candidates who applied for it. I'd like to think they wouldn't have hired me if I wasn't the right person for the job. So that's the one that comes to
Yeah,
mind for me.
Cynthia, I'm so glad you came up with a proper response to that. I had someone tell me, I think I've told this story on our podcast before, but I had someone tell me that I stole their job. And it was at a Wabash event too. No,
Oh,
not
wow.
an ATS event. I'm sorry. It was an ATS early.
Okay. Early career scholars.
Yeah, it was one of
Yeah.
those. Sorry. So they told me that I stole their job. And I asked them, that's interesting. Tell me what you teach. And they began to tell me what they teach. And they said that they were a strict historical critic. And I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. And I began to tell them what I taught at that school. And I said, I teach this, feminism, womanist thought, all these other things. And I said, so based on what you've told me, I did not steal your job. You were not qualified for this job. So sometimes we just have to have these conversations with these people and put them in their place, because it's just amazing to me the boldness that a lot of men have. And for us, we have to begin to exude that same boldness. That's just all there is to it.
Yeah.
You know what's so important to note is that, yes, you do womanist scholarship and feminist and so many other things, but you could do historical criticism and grammatical criticism in your sleep. So it's not like this is all you do. Like, you do many things, right? So crazy.
Well, and I do think it's worth noting, like, even if every institution that would hire us was doing DEI hires, we would still be a minority because this field is dominated by men. And I mean, I would, in the faculty that I'm currently at, I am the second woman that has been on faculty here in Bible. And that it's insane, especially at an institution that is dedicated to training women. And so, like, I mean, even if it was like, oh, we're going to do all DEI all the time, we would still be a minority voice, and our voice is valuable. Like, I do want to make sure that we say that, like, because we're women, we have something unique to offer. And so if maybe that institution, Cynthia, was looking to hire a woman, and they probably should have been, you know? And that doesn't take away from
Right.
you being perfectly prepared and skilled for that job, right? Um, it's just like, yeah, women have something to offer.
Yeah. I was the only female in that department for quite some time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now my colleague, because once I left, now my colleague that we brought on, she's the only female in that department for quite some time. But I'm really pleased to say that in my current institution, um, we have loads of female biblical scholars, historians, um, theologians, ethicists, and it's amazing to see a place that is finally recognizing the invaluable contributions of female scholarship.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
What about in preaching or teaching or anything else?
Oh, I have kind of a fun one. It's not teaching or preaching, but when I was doing my PhD, I just had a baby right before I had to take my comprehensive exams, and I was breastfeeding. And so these comprehensive exams could last like 6 to 8 hours. And so I was like, shoot, if I have to sit there that whole time, my boobs are going to explode. Um, so I had luckily we had like, because it was all men that I could talk to about like my comprehensive exams and all of my professors, right? But we had an administrative assistant, and I went to her and I was like, Lisa, will you ask these men if there is some way that I could take like, I don't know, a 20-minute break in the middle just to pump? And she was like, I got you, girl. And so that was kind of a positive experience that, like, they hadn't thought about it. They hadn't thought, oh, there's a lactating woman that is taking comprehensive exams. And so, and then again, at another institution I was at, I had another baby and I shared an office. And so I had to like email the provost and be like, hey, I'm going to have to pump somewhere. Can you come up with a place? And she took care of it right away, and it was fantastic. But it's just like those sorts of things that like it doesn't occur to men that, oh, her boobs might explode if we make her sit for that whole comprehensive exam.
So when we're talking about classrooms, almost every classroom I've ever taught in, it's not crafted for women at all.
Mm,
I was teaching in pregnant, and they have a stool, or you could stand, and there was no like desk, that has like a privacy panel where you could actually sit down. And I couldn't stand for that long when I was pregnant. And if I get on top of a stool, like I was wearing a dress or a skirt or something. And so just not thinking about women's bodies and
mhm.
how we sometimes, might need something other than just a stool there. Yeah, almost every classroom I've ever taught in has been like that. So
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
I'll relay one classroom experience. This is a microaggression. Well, I think it's a macroaggression in the classroom. I was teaching again Greek, and we were translating Philemon. And I actually wrote about this for a Wabash blog. So you can find this on Wabash's blog. It's entitled, I Love Dr. P, But.
Mhm.
And the student, we were translating Philemon, and I made mention that Philemon, the text of Philemon was used to justify the slave code of 1864 that was saying you have to send enslaved people back to the South. So they were reading Philemon and saying, because Paul is sending Onesimus back to Philemon, that you have to send enslaved people back to the South. So I made mention that there were legal folks, lawyers who were looking at that slave law of 1864 or 1860 something to begin to think about how to enforce travel laws for women who would cross states for abortion care.
Mm.
And I made mention of that in the classroom. And one of my students in the classroom got upset that I made mention of that. And so they emailed every white student in the classroom, but none of the black students in the classroom. And they did not email me. But they said in the email, I love Dr. P, but she's wrong about this, and here are all the reasons that she's wrong, and that would never happen in the United States of America. But come on. And also, they said something like, and they went to the paternalism of, as a black woman, she should be concerned that white people care so much about black babies that they don't want them to be aborted. I was like, this person, really? And so I had to take time because, of course, the white students in the classroom sent me the email. They're like, we're not going to let her not know about this. So they sent me the email. And then I had to go into the next class and take away time from the classroom and address this email, address the student, and address how this was just wrong. And you don't do these things. And I was still right because I had to come with the receipts from the from Georgetown Law School about how this was actually happening.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
Wow. I can't believe that they emailed behind your back about that. That's incredible. I had a student once when I first finished my PhD and I was adjuncting at an institution and they had asked me, it was kind of a last minute thing, as a lot of sometimes adjuncting is. And this one, it was at a Christian institution, and the professor who was supposed to teach this Intro to Old Testament class was a military chaplain. And he had to do something else, so he couldn't do the class. So they gave it to me. And there was this military vet who took the class purposely because this military chaplain was teaching the class. And he was very upset when it got switched over to me. Not just because it wasn't this wonderful guy who was a military chaplain, but because it was a woman teaching scripture. And he's a little bit older than your typical student in the class, that classroom. And he would sit in the front row with his King James Version. That's a whole nother conversation we should get into at some point. But he would sit there, and anything I said that would just make him like mad, he would angrily flip through his Bible, and you could see him just furiously taking notes. And so one day he had become kind of buddy with another guy in the class. And one day this other guy had stayed behind to ask me some questions, some legitimate questions about the class. And the military vet guy stayed, kind of lingered for him because they were going to walk to chapel or whatever. I don't know. But then he kind of put himself in our conversation and he interrupted and he said, he was very angry. He was yelling at me and he said, "You are teaching us to distrust the Bible."
Mm.
And I just stopped and I put my hand up and I said, "So and so," I said, "if you don't like me or the way I teach the class, you are welcome to leave." And he started in on me again. So I just repeated myself again and then I left. And I was visibly shaken about that because that guy was very aggressive, and I felt unsafe for sure. And of course, I after I went and talked to some of my the people who were overseeing me, my supervisors, and they were great about it. They were really, really good about it and very supportive and, of course, talked to the student. But I don't know if anything ever got in his file.
Yeah.
He could threaten a female professor, and, still be a student at that institution.
The experiences that I've had, and maybe you all have had these too, is that students get way more upset about things we say in our female bodies that if
Hmm.
someone in a male body said it, they wouldn't get upset. So every semester we teach Intro to Christianity for all the students in our university, and everybody in my department teaches it. And at this point now, they're all men except for me. And we will teach the exact same curriculum. We're using the same textbook. The main one that people get very upset about is the part in the textbook that talks about God is not a man. We're talking about the first person of the Trinity. We're saying God is not a male. And they get so upset. And all my reviews, they're saying all these horrible things like she's pushing her views on us. She's feminist. They call me a socialist all the time because I teach Jesus in the classroom. But none of my male colleagues get that. And they teach the same exact thing.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, and that's another thing, the reviews. I mean, studies
Yeah.
have shown over and over again how students are much more critical, harsher to their female professors than to their male professors.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was
For
having a conversation with some colleagues, and my another female that I work with that was teaching Hebrew at the time was just getting tons and tons of negative feedback from these certain students. And she was like, this is really hard as a woman. And one of my male colleagues said, well, you're doing the same thing that we're all trying to do. And I just piped up and said, yeah, but it's more difficult when you embody what they dislike. And she was like, Anna, thank you for saying that. That's so true. I think just like being a female embodied in the classroom and having these young men in there, it adds a level of discomfort for these young men. And then it adds a level of discomfort for us because we embody what they oppose. And what they oppose is women talking about the Bible.
Yeah. I find that I have to do mid-semester um, surveys to kind of figure out what is going well in the classroom and not allow just the end of semester reviews to be the only thing that's said in the class, to be the only thing that's said about my teaching. Because I remember when I went up for tenure the first time, I put in my tenure portfolio those studies that talked about how students harshly criticize female professors even more above male professors. And then the added layer of minoritized professors as well. It's just, we again are presumed incompetent no matter what.
Yeah, and they'll be free to comment even in the comment section of your review, something about the way you look, about the way you dress.
Mhm. Yep. I always, since day one of teaching, wear dresses and heels. Never, and I started working in Seattle where the dress code was jeans,
Yeah.
flannel, flip flops.
Flannel.
That was like, no, I'm never, ever, 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 ever doing that.
Yeah,
Well,
I
we have
had
to
a
be more professional looking. We have to do that, or else we will invite criticism. I've even worked in an institution where they had different dress code for men and women. They were very, yes. So they're very clear about, yeah, what is professional for women is blank, 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 right? So,
I had a female student recognize the discrepancy between the male professor's dress and the female
mm,
professor's dress. And she said something, I just want to thank the female professors for dressing so professionally because it shows that you take us seriously.
ooh.
I thought, wow, okay. I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's an excellent point.
Mhm.
Well,
We've come.
before we wrap up, I wanted to say thank you to all of you for sharing your stories,
Mhm.
because the way that you are standing up against this systemic sexism and racism is very inspiring. And I'm still on the road to figuring out how to be bolder again to stand up against these, and you all are helping me so much. So thank you for that.
Oh,
Oh, Jen, you help us so much. You're
yeah,
Al Mohler's worst
likewise.
nightmare.
Oh, well,
I
that's
feel like I feel like Jen makes me kinder.
She
That's
does,
very
doesn't
true.
she? Yeah, you guys are awesome. And it's so nice to have a chance to talk about this
Yeah.
and to let other female scholars know that they're not alone in this, and maybe to bring awareness to some of people who maybe didn't think that this or didn't know that this was going on.
Yes.
100%.
Yes. Well, ladies, this was a great conversation. I really appreciated hearing all of your voices just about hard scholarship, our scholarship, the things that we've experienced in the classroom and even in the pulpit. Thank you to our listeners for listening to Bible Divas. We really enjoyed bringing this episode to you, and we hope to hear and talk to you soon. And we look forward to bringing you more guests on our next upcoming episodes. We will talk to you soon.
This has been another change-making conversation from Baptist News Global. The episode you've just heard is part of a special podcast series called Bible Divas. Be sure to follow BNG Daily at baptistnews.com and subscribe to get notifications about future episodes. Baptist News Global is a national nonprofit news service that is independent, free, and faithful. BNG is supported by readers and listeners like you. Learn more at baptistnews.com.
This episode was produced and edited by Mac Bowles of TKG Communications, LLC, Dallas, Texas.